I'm not a 911 operator, but I used to volunteer at the suicide hotline in college. This happened to another volunteer called Sue. There are lots of regulars who call just to have someone to talk to. One of the regulars is called Tom. He called in one evening when another girl was working. He had serious schizophrenia and would often go off his meds, and this was one of those times. Tom called and informed Sue that he had stabbed himself in the stomach, and he was waiting in the kitchen for his family to come home and kill them. She assumed he was off his meds and was imagining this, but regardless she followed protocol and alerted the police. They went to his house, and he had been telling the truth. He had stabbed himself with a kitchen knife, and was in fact sitting in the kitchen bleeding out, while waiting for his family to get back home. He was having paranoid delusions, which he had frequently, that his family was the Illuminati, and was slowly trying to kill him. Thank God this girl followed protocol, or he very likely would have died, and his family may have been hurt too. The police took him to the ER, and I'm assuming he was later admitted to a psychiatric facility. I have no idea what happened to him after that. I've been a 911 police dispatcher for 3 years now. I work for a major metropolitan area, with gangs, frequent killings, a lot, and I mean a lot, of fatal and non-fatal heroin overdoses. Just recently, we gave a female 36 milligrams of Narcan. It's ridiculous, I know. And a little off topic, but I just wanted to share one call that's been sticking with me for a while. A few summers back, a 10-year-old kid was in his living room, and some idiot shot a high-caliber rifle at their house and shot him in the back. I listened to him in the background on the call saying, "Grammy, I don't want to die," over and over again. The kid didn't make it. I drink a lot on the little bit of time I have, and get off to cope with the stress this high job brings. I worked in a really small department, a rural community on a highway intersection, so we didn't get much action. I worked the overnight shift, but apparently sometimes in the afternoon. One day, a man in a pickup truck had rear-ended a woman in a convertible on the highway, both going highway speeds. I never figured out how or why that happened exactly. He must have been drunk, but I never found out. The important part, however, is that when he hit her, her car was forced into the next lane. It was a one-lane road, 65-mile-an-hour limit in either direction, and her little convertible sports car hit a semi-trailer head-on with a combined 130 miles per hour. She passed under every axle and impacted on a second semi-trailer directly behind the first. The first semi-trailer ran off the road from the impact, but the driver was largely unharmed, just somehow bruises and scrapes. The second semi pulled over with relatively minor damage to the front of the truck. The woman and her convertible were both completely flattened. Our department wasn't allowed to leave the scene until the coroner showed up, and he's notoriously slow. It's a 3-hour drive to our end of the county, and he hates making the trip. It took him 10 hours to show up. The call lasted over 14 hours. 14 hours of our guys on the scene next to a woman who's unquestionably dead, and a man who needs a couple of ibuprofen and a tow truck. I closed out the call log in the early hours of the morning that day after the incident. I'm really glad I wasn't there on site, but all the firemen and EMTs who returned from that call were absolute zombies. Nobody said a word until the next day. It was pretty brutal for a department whose average call is an elderly fall assist. I answered a call from a guy who was screaming about how the relative of his that he found outside was bleeding from the head and was laying on the ground. It was a call that was way out there in the boondocks, so I was going to be on the line with this guy for a while. It wasn't helping that he was freaking out and yelling at me nearly the entire time. When I was going through questions with him about the patient's condition, he was yelling, "He's bleeding from the head, send help." We already had an ambulance and police and fire on the way. And suddenly during the assessment he yells, "He's not breathing." At that point, I do my best to calm him down and guide him through CPR instructions. He did a very good job, and the patient started breathing again after about 300 compressions. Once that happened, I immediately went to the control bleeding protocol and asked him to get a dry clean towel or cloth and apply it to the wound on his head. The guy would not do it. At this point, he was an emotional wreck and didn't want to leave him no matter how much I tried talking to him to reason with him. I was practically begging the guy to get something to control the bleeding, and he kept saying over and over that he didn't want to leaving. After a while, the police showed up on the scene, and I asked him if they were there and he said yes. Just before I was about to hang up and let them talk to him, I heard a police officer say, "Sir, I need you to step away from that gun on the ground." That call gave me chills. I am not a 911 operator. However, one of my clients is, as I'm a massage therapist. One day she came in to see me and seemed very depressed and angry. I asked her what was wrong, and she told me that sometimes she wished she could reach through the phone and strangle some of the callers, and then she explained why. She said a woman called 911, saying that her baby was barely breathing and was turning blue. The woman sounded bored and uninterested. My friend said to her that she could talk to the woman through baby CPR, so she could try to save the baby's life, in the meantime before the ambulances arrived. The woman said she didn't want to do CPR, and my client kept repeating, "I can help you save your baby's life. Please just listen to me and go in with the baby and follow my directions." And the woman was very adamant about not wanting to go back to the baby and do this. So my friend stays on the phone with her while she waits for the ambulance. And the woman says she went back to check on her baby and thinks the baby had stopped breathing altogether. Still sounding bored or like she was really high on drugs, my friend said she told her boss or whoever would need to be told about this, and then had to take a break or go outside and cry. She just couldn't believe that a mother would not even attempt to save her child, or that she could sound so uninterested in the child dying in the next room. So yeah, she said she wishes sometimes she could reach through the phone and slap some sense into people, or at the very least, yell at them when they don't want to help. I was a criminal justice major in college, and as one of my summer jobs/internships, I was a non-emergency dispatcher at a 911 center. I was surprised about the number of non-emergency calls I got on the line. A couple of examples. An old guy, mad at the minority kids playing in the street in front of his house, threatened to go outside with his shotgun and confront their mum, because the police were taking too long to come and answer his complaint. A lady called saying she found a guy passed out in her driveway and wanted to know if she could ignore it or if we should send an ambulance. We sent an ambulance. The one that sticks with me, though, is that there's an elderly lady calling, saying that her grandson and husband were burning trash in the backyard, and something exploded, and her husband was on fire. Her grandson was 8 or 9 and couldn't do anything about it, and when the fire department got there, they said his skin was like melted plastic, and as soon as they tried to get him off the backboard, it came off, exposing all his organs. He died en route to hospital, and the grandson saw everything.